Morning, everybody. Yes, welcome to the panel on sustainable cityscapes. I'm Chris Dooley from JC&Co UK, and I'd like to invite our brilliant panelists to join us. So please, a warm round of applause for Inez, Christian, and Margus. Well, right, before we start, I'd just like you all to introduce yourselves and where you're from and your roles.
Yes, so I can start. My name is Ines Andersson, and I'm head of Riga City Development Committee, so I'm from Riga.
Hey, it's Margus Reinberg. I'm from Capital Group, and I'm the maintenance and technical director there.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christian. I'm from Tallinn or Tartu, so I'm from Estonia, from a company called Co-Mobility Group. We build technology, IoT devices for bikes and scooters. We also now build bikes and scooters ourselves, and we also operate tool scooters here in Riga and in Tallinn, Estonia. So we are in the micromobility field and segment.
Welcome. So we're here to talk about cities, and cities are fascinating, often beautiful places, and they hold absolute key to unlocking a sustainable future. More than half the world's population now live in cities. That number is just going to increase the decades ahead. Those cities generate more than 75% of the world's carbon emissions. And again, that number is just going to increase. As it stands, we are, as a planet, building the equivalent of a New York City every single month in this world, which is big stuff. But whether large or small, every city has a role to play in building a more sustainable future. Cities really are leading the way, whether it's demonstrating remarkable boldness and radical collaboration to help unlock some of the benefits of living in close proximity and pioneering new ways of living. I'm going to start with you, Inez. I was fascinated to read that Riga is part of the EU's climate neutral Smart Cities 100 initiative. It'd be great to hear more about that, the aims, the objectives, some of the innovations that you're pioneering here in Riga, and how that mission-led spirit is helping drive sustainability.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, we are also excited to be part of the Climate 100 mission initiative by European Union. And I can say that for Latvia, I think it's even more important, because if Riga will succeed, all Latvia will succeed, because Riga, of course, together, Riga metropolitan area, we are around 1 million inhabitants and generate around 60-70% of GDP. So if we tackle climate questions in Riga in a right manner all together, Latvia will also speed up in this question. And what is climate mission? It helps us to mobilize ourselves and think strategically, because, of course, we understand that climate questions and climate neutrality is not an easy game with one recipe. It is a very complex matter with different areas, different sectors to work with, and also with many stakeholders. So together today is a part of the stakeholders already here, and I'm very happy to see you all here. And we also, as a city, understand that only together with doing proactive work as a city, engaging with stakeholders, private sector, and also very important inhabitants, we will reach goals moving forward. But the goals are very ambitious. So the mission is that climate neutrality by 2030, and we understand that it is our ambition goal, but in the same time, European Union is also looking at this, that if these 100 cities will move forward, then others will follow, and we will anyway speed up the climate topics. And I myself believe that climate-friendly city is a healthy city and wealthy city. And when it comes to the healthy and wealthy, how I explained it to myself by also coming here, I was thinking, okay, healthy is because one part of our problem is transport, of course, pollution and CO2 comes from the transport sector. And if we move forward with actions towards compacting different CO2 questions regarding transport, we will also have healthier city. The other sector is, energy efficiency and buildings and energy. And then if we manage to make our buildings more energy efficient and our houses more sustainable, we will have wealthier people because they have more money to spend on other things. So the climate will drive forward also more healthier and wealthier societies.
You mentioned the importance of buildings there. Obviously, a city is a collection of buildings fundamentally, and those buildings are responsible for the vast majority of a carbon footprint of a city, typically both in the materials, the concrete, the steel, the glass that goes into them, but also the energy, as you mentioned, used day in, day out, keeping them warm, cool. August, are you able to perhaps elaborate on some of the work that Capital is doing in terms of the built environment here in the Baltics and making more sustainable buildings?
Yeah, sure. I think you're right in that sense that when we look at the emissions that come from the buildings, then they are in two categories. They're like materials that you use and the energy that you use to run the buildings, basically. And it's roughly about, let's say in Baltics, I think it's like 60% is the materials and 60% is the operations and 40% are the materials. And when we look at these categories, what we do is actually that the first thing, your product has to be solid. So we don't talk about it much, but I think it's very important that you need to really build the buildings that are good. So if you build a quality environment, the people enjoy it, they like it, they use it in the long term, then that's really good. That's a really good product. So I like maybe to parallel. It's like when you buy a overcoat, then you can maybe use it for 20 years, but you can use it for 1 year. So it's the same for architecture. You have to have a good architecture. People have to feel good in there. So ceiling heights, all that kind of thing, and that's the key of it. And this other perspective is also the energy that we're using, and that's also the key factor. And for instance, what we are doing is that let's say just an example of our project that we're very proud of. Elemental Business Center is that we have a geothermal piles there. So we are using geothermal energy to heat and cool the building. So we're getting like 70% of energy out of there. And it's something that we're doing with all our new developments, actually, in Tallinn and all other places. It's just a way of thinking for us. Maybe the next example is also that we're very high on building automations, that we really think long term, in that sense that we see that we are the developers who also operate and maintain the buildings. We are just not for selling things, we're just for the long term play. And that means that if we do decisions, we have to think like how do we manage them later as well. And that puts us in the position when we really maybe invest more first about this indoor climate and comfortability and so on. And that's the way we do it. And maybe the third example is like AI, that we're also using AI to run our buildings more efficiently, and they think that's a great thing.
Right. Well, we can come back to some of those technological advances shortly. I think when it comes to technology in cities, the potential is never any clearer than in the transport networks that connects people, and there's obviously huge potential within cities where people can live in close proximity, in well-designed cities, to rethink the way that we travel around. And one company in the Baltics that's at the foreground of that transition is KU. Christian, I don't know if you'd like to expand on the background on the business and perhaps the philosophy that underpins KU and your vision for more resilient cities.
Yeah, I think Ines told it really nicely that a healthy city is a wealthy city. So at our company, around 250 people work day and night to make our cities more healthy. So our mission is really to empower emissionless transport, to reduce deaths caused by emissions. Many people don't know it, but around 5 million people a year die prematurely because of air pollution. So it's more than traffic accidents or wars or etc. Everything combined. So it's the biggest killer in the world. So I always say that if you want to save hundreds of lives, study to become a doctor, and if you want to save millions of lives, study to become an engineer. But of course, engineers also messed it up with carbon and oil, so we have to clean it up as well. And I think what we do is we really want to empower people to move on two wheels and to move emissionless. So it's e-bikes, it's electric scooters, it's building technology for them. And I think it's not just about these vehicles and about the city, but it's also about bringing these vehicles to a new frontier. So thanks to our technology, you cannot steal these vehicles as easily anymore. So for example, the e-bike will only turn on from your mobile phone. If you steal it, you can track it and get it back. So we have this saying that our recovery rate of vehicles stolen is more than 100%, because if something gets stolen, then very often when the police go after that, they find 30 more bikes that were not tracked. So these are the innovations we want to bring there, because if immobilizers were introduced to cars, 95% of car theft was removed. So the fact that bikes and scooters are stolen so often is just because of lack of technology. But when we look more on what can mobility do in a city, is that it can free up space for people. So the number one problem we have in cities is that too much of the city is given away for cars. And very often it's not given away to the people who actually live in the city, but it's given away to the people who live in the suburbs of the city, so that they could move in and out of the city really conveniently. And I think that is completely wrong. Cities should be built for the people who live in the cities, because they pay the taxes and they elect the politicians. I think the biggest move what you can do when you really push for light mobility is you get the city back to people. And as Ines said, if the city is with people, it's more healthy, and when more it's healthy, it's more wealthy. So I think it's super easy with cities. Like there's so much more complicated things in the world, but with cities, it's so easy. Take away space from cars and everybody's happy. And if people don't believe you, send them to Copenhagen or Amsterdam and they will immediately understand. And I think when you have done that, nobody is dissatisfied afterwards. So it's a win-win.
It sounds so simple, but in practice, it's rarely is that simple, despite the brilliant examples you mentioned there. There's obviously a role for cities themselves to help encourage, in your case, light mobility.
I think there's also a super good example in Paris, where in Paris in like 3-4 years, it has changed completely. I think I've been 10 years ago, first time in Paris, and around 10 times I've been there. If you go to Paris now, you can walk on the street and enjoy it. And what their mayor did, she did a couple of changes. Then there was election, and she said, "Do you want me to do more changes?" People voted for her, and then she just went full on. So you can do really quick changes. It's not about the infrastructure. It's really about will and boldness in the end.
But it'd be difficult to take people with you on that journey. Paris has had its challenges, particularly with e-scooters and people perhaps being the problem in this mix, not using them in the most responsible way.
I think Paris even forbidden e-scooters, no?
Yes, but not bikes. So, I mean, it's like blondes or brunettes, right? It doesn't matter. In the end, space is taken away from cars, and this is what they've done phenomenally. I think the solution or decision on e-scooters was wrong and very populistic, but it's a longer topic. But I think the way how they actually engage with changing the city and this 15-minute approach, that everything you do daily should be 15 minutes away, I think that's phenomenal. I think the whole point of cities is that things are close by and you can do everything by walking or cycling. The moment you need a car in city, it's already bad urban planning, basically.
Maybe I can comment. On the way, on one side, I also believe in the revolution, but I have understood during 3 years we are in leadership in Riga City Council that it's for Riga probably at the moment evolution is the right way forward, as maybe other Western cities are already very proper public transport, which is a backbone for moving people around, and other like mobility infrastructure, whereas in Riga we are strategically just have started to kind of build and rethink about it. And we are moving forwards with making our public transport more convenient. We lowered the price for monthly ticket, and we saw that the public transport usage has increased. We are building infrastructure investments, and it takes some time to get the new stations in place around the railway. And also regarding mobility, other ways of mobility, we also believe that it is about multi-mobility, because people don't move just one way from A to B. They want to move with the public, sometimes they need cars, sometimes they jump on the bike or e-scooter. And regarding e-scooters, we're also looking for how we can make it more safer and more better placed in Riga city. But of course, there is also a way to do a revolution, but then you need a very revolutionary people behind it and voters.
Maybe it's in a way that what cities can do, they can set an example in that sense that if the cities are telling that we take away, like Christian said, basically the space from cars and give it to the bicycles, then actually that's where the developers also will follow. In that sense, that's like a key for us, that we say that, okay, we don't need to build so much parking spaces, which goes back to the regulations, actually, that you can say that, you can have more spaces for the bicycles, and we do also develop the more spaces for people to use it, or more comfortable infrastructure. So you have shower rooms, you have like saunas, maybe something like that. And if it's and even what the cities can do is that, I cycle in the winter myself. I try to go to the work by the bicycle, and what I find is that I can't do it because the bicycle roads are full of snow. So if we can remove the snow, that I would be very happy in that sense. But it's in Tallinn. Sorry, I think Riga is perfect probably. So.
I just want to add that I think that actually in the past 3 years, when we looked at Tallinn, Riga, or Vilnius, the 3 capitals of the Baltics, every one of them has done a huge progress. There was no bicycle lanes in Tallinn 4 years ago, like nada, like nothing. And now you can basically ride through the city on bike lanes. Riga was even faster adopting, I think 2 or 3 years ago, when they created a lot of this temporary, with these pillars or polars or how you call them. And I think Vilnius has done the best. I mean, Vilnius already looks like a European capital. So you can always do more, but I just want to compliment everybody in Baltics. We've done really good job in the past 3-4 years. It has really, really changed. It's very positive.
I think the Baltics, the cities you've mentioned have set a fantastic example. And I think maybe there's a benefit of scale, when you don't have a huge metropolis, you can perhaps pull some levers more quickly that help set that example. But what we've discussed here, I mean, it sounds brilliant. I'm sure everyone in the room would agree, 15-minute cities, there's no drawback to that for people, places that are livable, healthy. But believe it or not, in the UK, there's pushback even against the concept of a 15-minute city. It's populist, definitely, but also it's tied in with this concept of a just transition. And oftentimes we find people who live not in the city centre, maybe less well off, more reliant on cars, less well served by public transport and the benefits from more central living. But we still need to take these communities with us in order to have a truly sustainable cityscapes in the future and resilient cities. I don't know, Ines, do you have any examples of how Riga is able to help talk to these communities who might be more resistant to changing lifestyles, even if it seems like there'd be obviously win-win?
I think the first and to start, we need to offer a good alternatives, and when the alternatives are there, is that the people are standing the traffic jam, and when they see that the public transport is faster, then they know that they can change it. And I think with the new trains which will arrive very soon, I hope, train will be our metro of Riga, or some part of Riga, which will be bringing people into the city center very fast. And I hope that with our recovery financing that we have from EU, we will build a metro bus line, which is like transit rapid bus line towards a place where we don't have trams. So the public transport as a good alternative should be first. And then we can start with all kind of other measures of how we can limit or increase parking prices in Riga city center, or have some other limits about who is entering the Riga city center with their cars.
I 100% agree with Ines. It's not about telling people you should do this or that, but you really have to make the alternative better than what you're using today. So if the bus gets you there faster than a car, you will just use the bus because it becomes more efficient. The same thing with bikes or scooters. The thing I actually like most about bikes and scooters is that I never have to think what time it is. So I never have to worry about traffic jams because you don't have traffic jams. Otherwise, when you're with your car, you never know when you're going to be there and you have to time and stress about it. And adding to what you said as well is like, if you have office buildings where you have good bike parking, for example, if, for example, you could shower, etc., it all makes that so much more convenient. So you have these small steps you have to take to make these alternatives more enjoyable, better, just faster, more efficient.
And maybe adding there, what also cities can do is like, just maybe Estonian example is that if you're building the center of city, it's like really a burden. It takes like 10 years to do it. So it's, but what we need is like, we need more compact cities in that sense. We already have the infrastructure in the center and we need to build in centers, but it's much faster to build outside the centers, as an investor, you want to execute your project and that's your goal. And if it's much faster to do it outside the cities, then unfortunately, that's what happens. And also transportation follows, everything follows. So I think the key is just, in the cities to maybe less bureaucracy in the centers and just being more tight in there and taking that way. And I think one thing, what is also important that we have to understand the cities are also the clients, that they basically order the constructions and so on, and they can set the tone, what kind of buildings, what is the standard, and that you can lead the industry, you can show the example, you can show like a good practice, and you can be like a laboratory in a way, in a good way. But I understand it's difficult in the public center. I know it's difficult, but it's like you have to be brave, and that's what we have to encourage.
I was actually in another panel in Estonia where we discussed the same topic, that it's a huge problem for Tallinn, that there's so much development on the outside of Tallinn, so-called kind of suburban areas. And it was so crazy that I had a person from public transport, we had a city person, some car-related guy, car sharing, and etc. And we all agreed that there's no solution for these people. Like that they are so, vastly populated, that you just can't offer them services. Like you can't put a bus line there because it doesn't make any sense. So in the end, they just have to use their cars, but they will never get it conveniently to the city either because there's so many of them and you can't build such wide roads. So I think we're really getting to the saturation point where people would still like to live and have their own garden and a cheap house, but it just becomes so uncomfortable. And you're even in a worse place than living in the countryside, because you're kind of in between. And I think people should really think about it when they buy houses or homes for themselves and make these long-term 30-year investments, where it is also like on the map and how this influences their quality of life.
Fortunately, I think in a way that if you buy a house, then I think right now you're even thinking about it. Maybe like 10 years ago, you weren't thinking about it so much. It was like your dream, you could get this like piece of land somewhere outside. Yeah, right now people are moving back, which is like a good trend.
So much of this comes down to smart planning, and something I think you touched on, Margus, around the role that cities themselves play. And often we've seen cities are able to go so much faster countries in terms of the levers they can pull to try and trigger these kind of behaviour changes, or more to sustainable conditions in the built environment or transport networks. Do you think cities are doing enough? Is there more that they can do, perhaps in your example, in the built environment? I'm sure, and I've heard that Capital are building these brilliant high-spec developments with sustainability built in. I'd like to think that that's the norm across the Baltics, but I'm guessing, like in most parts of the world, it probably isn't. Is there more in terms of regulations or that could actually help or help steer more smart development, could perhaps stop some of this sprawl that's been described?
I think let's say maybe the regulations is not that's not the like subject, or that's not the key. Actually, it's what we see is like what is the, if you think about the product, if you think about the house, then what is driving is actually the private sector, the clients that we have, and it's so right now it's like if you're doing a new building, you have to do pre-em, for instance, and we are like constantly like pushing our limits on the pre-em. For instance, we're doing I think the only pre-em outstanding in Latvia that Elemental is representing basically. And it comes from the bank side. So everybody's looking at like the banks are looking at their portfolio, how green it is, and you have like bigger clients who are maybe more Scandinavian rooted and so on. But it's coming closer. I think also the smaller clients are demanding that your product would be certified in a way that you would have the certification of pre-em and so on. So I think that's what is pushing it right now. But what the cities can do, they're responsible for the public room, and that's something that we are looking for, that the public room would be high quality.
Regarding the Riga City Council, we have introduced a deduction in Riga real estate tax for the office buildings or buildings who has a BREEAM Elite certificate. So I think that is one way of kind of a carrot to from our side to show respect, and that we appreciate that real estate developers are going that way. But I think the main drivers will be anyways the clients. So our biggest challenge actually is our very big housing area where we have these big housing districts where is, and this is challenge. I think not city only challenge, it's a national challenge, because we have 6,000 buildings without energy efficiency. We need a new financial instrument which helps to have a long loans where the costs are not increased in the short term. And we need to do something about how the voting is taking place, because you cannot expect that 120 house owners or flat owners will come together and do this decision. And of course, from Riga City side, we have instruments to help with the project. We have a consultancy, advisory, but we need to do much more to really have a change in this sector.
You asked about what cities can do more. In my hometown, Tartu, which is the second biggest city in Estonia, for the past 10 years, there was a very strong city architect. And he also created a group of people or a team who were like 4 or 5 people. And they were only working on like urban space, living environment, where the city should be in 50 years. So kind of the softer side of that thing. And I think it's 100,000 people, and it was 4 or 5 people working only on like, the space of the city and how people feel there. And contrast, Tallinn is 5 times bigger, and I don't know that there is a team like that at all. There's just people who are like, looking at papers, doing like planning and committees and etc. There's nobody who kind of creatively thinks where the city should go. And I think there's this huge difference in Tartu in the last 10 years. It goes down to very small details, like, for example, all traffic sign posts are painted black, so you don't see them. There's less, let's say, visual noise and etc. But it also goes into urban planning, where are which kind of buildings, where is culture, where is, restaurants, etc. And I think this is what every city should really do. They should have a team of people who don't just look at, planning or this very specific technical stuff, but really think about city as an environment. And, you have professionals there. This already will lead to much better results. But the problem with that is it usually takes years, and, politicians are elected for 4 years. Tartu has just had the same party ruling for 20 years. So it has worked out, but yeah. But they shouldn't be a political, position. But this is something I would really advise every city to have.
Actually, in Riga City, we have now, as of 2 years, Riga City Architect Office with the main architect, space designer, so working on that area. But of course, what you can do now reach in 2 years, if we have been done 10 years ago, I think we would have already even more beautiful cities than we have today. and but we are heading there.
Maybe the end goal is still that the citizens or the users of the cityscape, they are getting more demanding. That if they get like a good public room, that's something that is like a standard. You're setting the standard. It doesn't go back. And I think that's how can you change things, like the more small steps and go further.
Yeah, and I think we have a very good example now in Tallinn. There's one street, Vana Kalamaja street. There was a completely random street in a kind of a urban area. Pedestrians had very little space, etc. Was completely rejuvenated. Super low speed on cars, very much of pedestrian. Kids playing on the street. Feels like you're in the countryside, something like this. And initially there was quite some drawback from people as well. But remember, now it's open. Like nobody, I think even the most negative guys said anything bad about it anymore. And even if they don't like it personally, their real estate value goes up like 20%, because it's just so much more nicer. So I think that's why I say it's win-win, that even the people who might really want to use their car, but if the real estate value goes up because the space is more livable, they will still be happy in the end. They can sell it and move away, even the worst case, basically. So.
That's a great way of taking people with you on this journey if they might be reluctant at the outset. So look, I think you've outlined some really good principles there. We need more long-term planning and presumably more collaboration between competing stakeholders and interests, whether it's the built environment, transport, but ultimately it's the cities who will provide the leadership to tie that together. We're getting down to the last 5 minutes or so. I don't know if we have any questions for the panel from the floor.
The first one to ask a question gets free tool ride.
We've got, I think it's quite dark out there. I think there is a hand up in the middle. I don't know if we have mics or if it's a kind of
I can give you a mic.
Shouting out.
I know this guy.
There you go. Very. We are in the guy. How access the key of the first and the key part of Africa. All settled. All the people there.
Sorry, I think the question was around how to keep cities accessible
for the people who don't live in the city. Yeah. It's a very good example. Thank you, Indrek, from the port point of view, because really Tallinn has this port in the central of the city, absolute central, and it has quite a lot of transit even for lorries. I think they've done a good job in pushing trucks away to different ports. But yes, you're right. This will be a problem you have to face and look at. Tallinn actually built a completely new road to serve the port. I don't have a good answer for it. It's a city planning question.
It is a city planning question, because what also Tallinn is trying to do is have port more open. It was quite closed. Right now you have the cities moving in that direction.
And of course, also, for example, for Riga, also we need to think how people can drive convenient around the city center without crossing it, because it's a relevant question. The same goes for Riga. Okay, how you can, you want to increase a better place for people in Riga, but how the people will drive around. So, and these big projects takes a very long time, because one thing is to plan them, then the project, and the financing of it, and then it's a building stage. So, and while the citizens want the change tomorrow, so that's what we have also trying to kind of balance, this kind of two-way speed. One is this middle term speed of how we build the infrastructure, and then the faster speed of doing a smaller change for showing that we are working towards that direction. We are not just thinking, let's build the roads and then we will do the small things. So that's why this, as you mentioned, we have these cycling lanes, which are not built cycling lanes, but with some color. We have some greenery pots where we cannot plant trees right now, but we want to show that we appreciate that the streets will become more green and more livable. So this is a balancing all the time.
I think what is better in Riga than in Tallinn is I think your bus station and train station is together in the central quite, right? But one thing that in Tallinn that is completely bizarre is that our main train station, the port, and the main bus station are all in different places of the city. So I think about this accessibility, a very big thing is bringing these things together. So if you take a train to the city, but you want to go to the airport or you want to go to the port, then they are very well connected. And I think we're doing a huge leap forward with the Rail Baltic project, where there will be this new fast train going through the Baltics, because then they're building this new kind of logistics hub into one place. So quite close to the airport, the train station, the bus station, hopefully will all be in the same place. So I think that's, again, city planning, it's just completely stupid to have them in different parts of the city. So people still need to commute somehow with their luggage and etc. So
questions raised quite a few interesting points there. Firstly, especially when we were talking about historic cities such as Riga and Tallinn, unfortunately, things weren't always designed perfectly with the 21st century and beyond in mind, and it's not easy to suddenly rip that up and redesign it. So you do have to work with what we've all inherited. And also the other point around design these amazing 15-minute cities and compact city centres, but these cities, capital cities in particular, have much wider, nations, in fact, to serve, as well as the outlying communities. And there's a balance and a trade-off between what works for the city centre communities and what works for the wider country, and how you can fit all of that together in a way that's financeable and achievable. Do we have yes, we've got another question. We might need to shout out as loud as you can.
What I'm missing here is IR. Your here and opposite set or quite very with I is black, right? My question is, what about electrical cities? Like, by 2030, the element no also car. So just said that you got that would know that myself not slide the car doesn't with it. What about these radical? I don't know. You did that. This week, I this.
Great question.
Thank you for the question. My personal motivation, I have 3 sons. My personal motivation is that when they grow up, they ask me, Daddy, how was it possible that you had these guzzling cars in the cities? That in their mind, it's not possible anymore. It's the same thing how we go to a nightclub now, and if somebody's smoking there, it just seems so awkward. But 10 years ago, everybody was smoking. So I think the moment these gas cars are out of the city, we will all just think, how was it possible that they weren't there? So I really want to achieve that. That's my personal motivation. And I'm a big believer of taxation and of governmental regulation. And I think it's the only way to do it. So I would really vote for that solution. I think EU has shown great advantages in sustainability, but they've all come from legislation. All of these emission norms for cars, everything, it's just legislation. So now it's just a question of how to avoid full-scale populism and right-wingers taking over if you make too radical decisions. But I think this is the right way to go in general.
Ines, I don't know, in the last few seconds, if you'd like to come in on that point. I know the smart cities have a 2030 climate neutral pledge, which is 6 years away.
2030 as the goal, and I think it is very kind of time limiting and very ambitious. But I also hear what you say. On the other side, it also comes with investment. So who is paying for it? And that's like how we will change it. And that's a part of the climate mission goal, where we're also putting all the actions on paper and discussing who is investing. Because if we want people to change from the fossil cars to other type of cars, for example, electrical cars or public transport, somebody needs to invest and support them, because without this kind of support, it will not happen. So it is bigger scale decisions even than the city can take. But we are very happy to be a part of this discussion and put this discussion on the table and discuss if it is possible.
Fantastic. Right, I think we're out of time. So a big thank you to our panelists, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah.
Thank you.